Hello, today is December 6, 2017, and we're here today to talk to Carl Scholz. And my name is Mike Madden. I'll be interviewing Carl. We have Laddie Chapman, who is doing the video production of this, and also today we'll be talking with Ruth. Carl, I have some questions for you, and the way I got these questions is Ruth sent out this email. Dear children, I have an assignment for each of you. I'm hosting Mike Madden and Laddie Chapman on Wednesday, December 6th. Mike will interview Dad about his life. I'm writing for some questions for Mike to ask, and I'm asking each of you to recall something you'd like us to talk about. So Ruth gave your children the assignment, Carl. Now you have to finish it. Carl, I've got a picture of you a long time ago.
Yes, I recognize that.
Yes. How old were you here?
I think I was 8.
I think you were a little younger than that.
Younger than, okay, good. Well,
8 months.
Yes.
7,
What
6,
year?
6.
What year were you born, Carl?
In 1927.
What was your childhood like?
Oh, I had a great childhood. It couldn't have been a better childhood. All kinds of excitement, great parents, great neighbors. Everything was fine.
When did you learn to speak German?
Well, going to all the social events that involved my family and others, and nearly everyone spoke German, so I finally caught on to what they were saying, and I learned some of it. Then I had a professor, Heinley, at the university, and I had a couple semesters of German, so I got picked up a few pointers there too. I remember one thing I did. The professor, he was from Austria. He had no sense of humor at all. But I was to translate a lustig widow, and I thought that was lustful widow, and that's a merry widow. So he almost had to be expelled from the class for
You were getting in trouble in German.
and getting in trouble with German.
Did you grow up on a farm, Carl?
Oh yes, very definitely. My father, after he came back from World War, and he incidentally was a genuine American hero, and he went to a vocational school in Wauwatosa for veterans, and so we had a very diverse farm. At that time that was the promoted very widely diversity. Today it isn't as diverse, but we had everything from chickens to pigs to raspberries to strawberries, an orchard. We had a good-sized orchard.
And you evidently did some hunting when you were a child,
Oh
Carl.
yes, yeah. I think that's when I was 6 years old. I think when I saw the cottontail rabbit. So that was a part of my life.
So in your farm, you could walk outside the door and go hunting.
That's right. Yeah.
Here's a picture of you when you're a little older, Carl. You're shooting up in the air.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I was probably shooting at ducks.
Well, you've certainly enjoyed ducks and other birds your whole life that I've known you, and been part of the Christmas bird count for 50 years, I think, almost.
I remember, I think I was in 5th grade, and we had to write as to what we wanted to do in the future. And when I became an adult, I said I wanted to have a wildlife refuge. That was my
Was your goal?
goal, and so I wrote up a whole essay about wildlife, becoming a manager of a wildlife refuge. So that became a reality
Yes.
to a degree.
Most of us think about becoming a fireman or a cowboy, but you were
Yeah.
going to manage your wildlife
Yeah,
refuge.
that's right. Yeah.
What's one of the most important things your parents taught you, Carl?
Well, how to work, how to get along with neighbors. Always be a gentleman, and probably taught me everything I learned ever and have stayed with all my life. They were great parents.
What was your school like when you were a young lad?
Well, it was a very good school. It was a state, what they call a state graded school. We had grades 1 through 4. We didn't have kindergarten. And I incidentally started first grade when I was 4 years old. And we had a 5 through 8 in one of the rooms. And they were excellent teachers. In fact, my first grade teacher came to Door County and retired some years ago, so I got to see her. It was Corinne. Her name was Corinne Kleiner.
Yes.
And Edgar Bruce was a 5 through 8 teacher. He was also a great teacher. One thing I remember, he insisted that we read books, so we had an honor roll of books, of books we had read. You got a sticker every time you read a book. You had to first present a synopsis of what you had read, and that was difficult. But then you got a sticker to put on a plaque in the classroom. So that was an important part of teaching at that time.
Yes.
Was really encouraging a lot of good reading.
Carl, as an employee of yours once, we always had trouble reading your notes and directions in writing, but you told me you won a handwriting contest.
Yes, I did. No one believes that. But there are only 2 in the contest.
So,
Bornyar was the other one, my closest friend. But the reason I know I discontinued cursive writing was when the service, we had to become radio operators, and with international code, and you had to print. So I started printing, and that's what I've done ever since. I don't think I know how to write in a cursive way anymore.
one of your children wanted you to talk about a favorite memory of going north fishing with your family and your sister Dottie.
Yes, that was a big event. Every year we went up north, and we stayed on Rolling Stone Lake in a cabin, and that was a big event. We'd have to get up about 3 in the morning, and then start out for a trip up north. And on the way up, we had to stop about a half a dozen times. That was an important part of our life.
Well, all of us that know you, Carl, know how passionate you are about the environment, and it seems it started at a very early age. What influenced you to be such a champion of our natural environment?
The environment in which I lived. We lived close to the Milwaukee River, so I spent a lot of time in and on the river. And we also, on part of our farm, we had a nice swamp, and I was very fond of that swamp. And I remember seeing the first yellow slipper. Anyway, the first yellow slipper.
I remember you saying as a child your feet were wet more than they were dry.
Yes, that's true. I was in the river.
Yes. And Carl, you showed me a nice book that you evidently made, the cover and so forth,
Yeah.
from a 4-H camp that you went to. Tell us a little bit.
Yes, as a 4-H member, I think we had an opportunity to apply to a conservation conservation program for youth. It was a state program, and was sponsored by the Federal Cartridge Corporation. And there at this, in fact, I attended it twice in consecutive years. But one of the staff members was Aldo Leopold, and also Ranger Mac. I have Ranger Mac's autograph in my book, but I didn't get Aldo Leopold's. I should have gotten his, but I did get the signature of the president of the Federal Cartridge Corporation, because they had sponsored it. The following year, I attended the same program, the same camp, and was held at the Pines Resort near Wisconsin Dells. So it was very interesting, and I got to know a lot of other great people who were conservationists.
And Carl, I think we'll go on to meet this young fellow.
Oh, yes. That picture was taken in Japan.
Was it? When you were about 17 or 18 years old?
Yeah. I think I might have been 19 then.
Okay.
Or maybe it was 18 or 19. Yes, I was part of the 11th Airborne Division. They're known as the Airborne Angels.
And I've got a few photos of, evidently, when you were doing some paratroop work.
Oh, yes, the Airborne.
Yes. You jumped out of planes?
Oh, yes. Yes, that was part of my training at Fort Benning. And then later, of course, when I went to Japan, I will continue it I was assigned to 11th Airborne. And
one of your children asked how, when you were stationed out in San Francisco before you went over to Japan, how did you tell your parents you were going overseas? That must have been quite a announcement.
Oh, yes, it was. I remember I was from Fort Benning. I went to Fort Dix, and I thought I was going to Europe. But it was, I got orders to go to San Francisco to Camp Stoneman, and then go to Japan. But I called them on the telephone to tell them that I was leaving. I was kind of a shock that I was leaving so soon, and that would cost $12
For the phone call?
For the phone call. That was about all the money I had.
You were deployed to Japan, and what did you do there, Carl?
Well, initially I did guard duty, and I also did a little ski instruction, because there was a lot of snow, and we had to patrol certain areas, and we did that partially on skis. But later and then we had also night guard duty, which I didn't appreciate. That was pretty dangerous. And I got an appointment as a librarian for the company librarian. So I had a library staff of 3 people, a civil service worker, and Aki Kano, and Osamu Takamatsu. I don't know if I have a picture of them, but I think we have one here somewhere. So I did that, as well as a number of other things that by assignment. This was at Morioka, Japan, and later was transferred to Hachanoi in northern Honshu, and I was also a librarian there until I was left the service.
How has your military service impacted your life, Carl?
Oh, well, really made me appreciate the military and what you have to do to be a good service person.
Well, thank you. I think we'll take a little break here then, idea. Carl, one more thing about your military past is you knew this fellow.
Yes, I knew him real well. He was a classmate of mine at Port Washington High School. And we both went to Fort Dix in New Jersey, and he went to Europe and I went to the Pacific. And he was in the Battle of the Bulge and was captured, and then was featured on the front page of Life magazine as a living skeleton, and the photograph shows that it didn't seem possible that he could be a living person and be healthy today. And he's alive right now.
And he was down to 70 pounds or something like that, I believe.
Yeah.
He was all skin and bones.
He became the assistant postmaster in Port Washington, and every day he climbs the stairs to the Roman Catholic Church in Port Washington. I think he must have 500 steps up there.
Yes.
So he attributes that to his healthy life.
And he became very involved in the honor flight program.
Yes,
too,
he organized it for the Ozaukee County veterans. And I, of course, I'm from Ozaukee County, from Waubeka, so that's why I was included.
We'll talk about that honor flight a little later.
Flight, yeah.
Carl, after the military, then you went on to school.
Yes. I did go to, I spent 1 year at the University Extension in Milwaukee because I couldn't get housing in Madison. So then after I had 1 semester in Milwaukee and went to school in Madison and studied vocational agriculture.
And you were helped by the GI Bill, you mentioned.
Oh, the GI Bill, yes. Yes, I remember I was, my last semester, my GI Bill payments ran out, so I had to finance that myself, and it cost me $700 for a semester. That was a lot of money then.
Yes.
That was in 1951.
And after you graduated, Carl, you found your way to Door County. How did that happen?
Yes, well, I knew that Door County was a kind of area that I would like to habitat I would like to live in, with water and trees and a lot of special activities, and just a favorite spot that I thought would be great to live in.
So you came to Sevastopol School as the high school agriculture instructor?
I came to Sevastopol as a vocational ag teacher, teaching high school students and also adults. At that time, under the Smith-Hughes Act, you had to have high school students and adults.
And one of the best things about that job is somebody you met up here, isn't it?
Yes, and I went to a 4-H camp.
I'd like to introduce Ruth, Carl's partner for many years. And
65.
tell me about the picture, Ruth.
Well, that was our wedding, and it was in Waywega, Wisconsin, my hometown, at the Presbyterian Church in 1952. And
Carl, you were in your early 20s yet then, weren't you?
Yes. See, I've been 24, I think, 23 or 24. Let's see, now I've been 52, so it would have been,
Whatever.
That's when you were still an instructor
that
here.
would be 12, yeah.
What were you doing in Door County, Ruth?
Well, I was the Door County Home Economics Agent for the University of Wisconsin Extension. And I came in 1949 and we met up here.
I remember the story of, might have been your first date, I'm not sure, but Carl brought you a corsage.
Yes, he did. I guess our first time that we went out, he invited me to go surfboard riding with his friend Warren, brought his boat and his surfboard. And I was the only one that had ever used a surfboard, and eventually one of them lost the surfboard. So it didn't last long, but then we had a date to go to Peninsula Players, and he arrived at the door with a corsage of carrots and celery all tied together with a ribbon. And that's when I decided that maybe he was okay.
Unique at the least, right?
I thought it was funny.
And soon after you were married, Carl, you became an administrator at Sevastopol.
Yes, after 3 years of teaching vocational ag, I became the district administrator. I know still hold the record as being the youngest in
The youngest school administrator at 26 years old in Wisconsin.
in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Some people, do you ever regret becoming an administrator?
No, I don't think so. I know that the board approached me, the school board, and I said, I'll take it for a year. I'll try it for a year. Well, it wasn't a very intelligent answer. Because then I remained in that position for 24 years.
30. 33 years.
33 years, yeah.
Those many years at Sevastopol, you also acted as a teacher
Yes,
as well as administrator.
yes. Yes, I continued for 2 years, but I continued in vocational ag in the school. And then we hired a high school principal, and then I no longer taught the vocational ag classes.
But you were also a math teacher and school bus driver and
Yes, whenever we needed a substitute teacher and we couldn't get one, so I subbed wherever I could, and also.
He also had to go to school at Madison every summer to get his master's.
Drove a school bus, and whatever else was necessary.
you tell a good story of him driving the wrestling school bus once, and you would go along.
Yes.
But
We were going to Coleman, and he was always having the kids call a number. They would call a number when they got on the bus, and as soon as they got back on, they would call their number again. So we were at wrestling in Coleman, and I went to the bathroom afterward and got into an argument about a pin with some mother of a wrestler, and he got on the bus, called the numbers, and away he went. And finally, I think it was one of the Bernard boys said, Mr. Scholz, Mr. Scholz. And your wife is not on the bus. So he had to turn around and go back and pick me up at Coleman.
he'll never forget about that.
Now, he'll never forget it because I'll never let him forget it.
Carl, I've got a picture of you as an administrator here. What's some of the best memories you have from Sevastopol?
Yes, many, many good memories. I should start with the consolidation. Sevastopol was the first 112 consolidated school district in Wisconsin. And when I came to Door County, there were still 8 schools that were not included. Originally there were 7 that were consolidated into the Sevastopol Consolidated School District number 1. And then I integrated 8 elementary schools into the Sevastopol School District. That concluded the consolidation.
That's when I met you, Carl. I was 10 years old, and Jacksonport School closed and was consolidated in with Sevastopol School.
We brought you lunch. Remember the lunch?
Yes, they brought lunch in some great big thermos cans.
That's right.
And
So we included school lunch in all the elementary schools.
and busing. And busing's been an issue over the years for
Yeah.
Sevastopol.
Yes, it certainly was. We, the Sevastopol School District, from the time it consolidated and transported the students, that was the first free transportation for students. And they also transported the St. Peter and Paul students. And that was later ruled to be illegal. So Edgar Rudolph and I went down to meet with the state superintendent, and he threatened to incarcerate us. Well, I didn't even know what that word meant, but I thought it wasn't a good idea to do whatever they were going to do to us. But later I found that was jail time.
So they were telling you it was illegal to
It
transport.
was illegal to transport
Parochial
them.
school
If we
students.
continued, we would be charged with illegal transportation. So we formed a school bus company, EJSS School. The corporation bought the school buses. I managed the transportation company, so we transported the students legally, not illegally. Later we worked on legislation that required the public schools to transport the parochial, the private schools.
And so it is today yet.
There are certain right conditions they could transport them unless they were at least, I guess, a mile or so from the school.
One of my favorite memories from school is the conservation club that you started, Carl.
Yeah,
And for decades, you were the advisor to a club that gave us experiences.
yeah. We had 35 years of those. Those are very interesting. We traveled all over the state. Well, I guess it was about 33 because then the girls became a part of the conservation club, and then when we had just day trips instead of weekly trips.
Yes, you took some of us rural boys that had never been camping and fishing and seeing our first buffalo and things like that. So
Yeah.
it was,
Yes, I remember one of the trips was, I guess every one of our trips we probably stopped at that limnology project near Bowler Junction. At that time they called it Five Lakes limnology study, and there were 15 or 20 of us. And at that time, one of the requirements was that every fish you caught, you had to keep. And we caught 800 fish, mostly bluegills and perch. And you ask about the interesting things that I did as an administrator. institute, a school, and the Sevastopol School, and St. Peter and Paul, the church. The entire area had a sewage problem. So I organized and developed organized a sanitary district that to collect the sewage, and we used the lagoon system for treating the sewage, which is very operating today very successfully. It's operated since 72, 72. And it's operating very successly today.
And the lagoons were built on some Sevastopol School
Yes, that was
property.
I used, at that time, there was money for bounty money when they discontinued bounty money. You could apply for that money, which I did, and we bought an 80-acre tract for I think $5,000, and that's where those lagoons were built, and that was very successful. And we also included the Velma area and the sanitary district, and of course.
Another thing you instituted, Carl, was that the school became a smoke-free zone.
Oh yes.
I think that was one of the first schools to do that.
Yes, that was I received an award from the American Cancer Society saying that was the first public school district in Wisconsin to go smoke-free. Oh, they didn't know about the nation that there probably were some school districts that didn't allow or did not allow smoking even nationwide, but Wisconsin was the first one.
And another thing, Carl, you were really involved in teaching the whole student, probably some influence by you, Ruth, and the school lunch program and the free milk machines and the only apple machine I've ever seen, Carl.
Yeah.
We didn't have candy machines, we had apple machines. But the lunch was an important part of the school. So.
Yes, it was.
Yes, they had some excellent school lunch staff people. They really
Yes,
did a great job.
they put their life into it.
And
They were employees for many, many years.
Yeah.
About this time, you two and some other couples got the idea of the farm. And the farm was something that took a good part of your life after that, wasn't it?
Yes, it did.
But what a wonderful historic and working idea. Where'd you get the idea for the farm, Carl?
Well, I had always had that in the back of my mind that it would be a good idea to have a museum of rural America. And we had a neighbor or a shop, and I got together and we decided, and he went to old McDonald's farm near Slinger.
We did too.
And we did too, and we thought that was a good idea, but they did a poor job of displaying rural America. So there were two other families, the Shop family and the Roth family, formed the Farm Corporation.
And Evenson's.
Oh, and Evenson, too. George Evenson's family was a part of it, but eventually it was just the Shop family and our family that continued to operate, and then eventually the Shop family decided they would like to retire from the farm, which they did, and we continued to operate it for another 10 years and then sold it to two former employees, David and Jeff, tank, and they're very successfully operating the
And
farm
they're
today.
finding out how much work it is. And I was wondering what it was like being a school administrator all day and then working at the farm half the night.
That's right. And required getting up quite early, sometimes working by automobile lights.
Yes, it was often after dark when you got home for supper, wasn't it?
Was-
Your son John asked that you and Orv are, the new word is pickers. You would find things that, for the farm that were,
Yeah.
and he's wondering, what's one of the most memorable things you guys found and collected that you can think about?
Oh, a model 1923 Model T. And that almost ended up in a broken family.
Is that the time he took out a loan without asking?
They came riding into our yard with a 1923 Model T.
And I said, and our kids need shoes.
How were the kids involved in the farm?
Oh yes, they all went to work there and enjoyed it. And they think of that as fond memories. I should mention the Model T. I restored 3 Model Ts in my day, and this was one of them that I restored. But another one was really a very special Model T because it was built in 1927, but they didn't have a 27 model. So that's in a museum, an auto museum near Milwaukee today.
Before we go away from your administrator career here a little bit, Carl, I have a picture of you and Carla here where you're both wearing a wig.
Oh,
And it must have been a party that they were having fun. But I remember you as an administrator, Carl, putting a wig on or a musician's
yeah.
tuxedo and
Yeah.
being part of the school parties.
Yes,
way.
that was during the
Gong show.
gong show.
Yes.
Yeah, the gong. But even as soon as I set foot on the stage, they gonged me.
Well, I
But I
remember.
ignored that.
I remember once you put a wig and a white bathrobe on, and we played basketball against a professional girls team.
Oh, yeah.
So you were ready for a good time.
Yeah.
There was opportunity.
Let me just tell you that this is not Carla, it is me.
That's you.
Yes,
Wow, Ruth.
with a wig on.
Where was
I
that?
thought it was your daughter.
No. We were younger then.
Oh, yeah, that, yeah.
Yes. At the farm, Carl, where did you find all the buildings that are?
Yes,
There.
there were no buildings there at all. One was a home of George Bassford's home. That was the first building that we moved to the farm. And then we built some, and we also got a building when that housed some of the workers that built the canal, and then we got several other buildings from around Door County. In fact, today there are 24 structures
Wow.
at the farm. I say structures because some are not more than just shelters.
Yes.
That picture happens to be 3 generations. Building fences, it's Carl, John, and Dustin.
So the whole family just kept going, didn't they?
The grandchildren, everybody.
Carl, you've received many awards, many of them while you were teaching and an administrator, and many since. The first one I remember thinking about was the Citation of Beautification
Oh,
you received from Governor Lucy.
yeah. Yeah.
That was from your days with the Natural
Yeah, I
Beauty
had
Council?
forgotten about that. Yes, that's right. That was in the days of Lady Bird Johnson. She had founded the Natural Beauty Program throughout the whole country. And we had one that was very successful, and it was the last natural beauty organization to continue operating in Wisconsin. Yes, and I got an award from Governor Lucy. Incidentally, we were not always friends. He had introduced a special financing for schools. They're called
Negative AIDS.
What was the
Negative AIDS.
negative AIDS program? And I was very, very much opposed to that because that would put a real burden on the school districts that had relatively low tax rates, like Sevastopol and several of the other Door County schools. So I fought that, and I remember we had a couple of busloads of people who went to Madison, and when we got to the Capitol building, only one could meet with Governor Lucy, and I was selected to do that. So I met with him and told him that it was unconstitutional and it would be a nice idea if he pigeonholed that bill. Well, he didn't take my advice. It continued to be considered, but finally it was ruled unconstitutional because the Constitution stated that any money raised for school purposes had to be expended therein. We couldn't give it to another school district by a state funding program.
And Carl, you've won many environmental awards. Here I'm holding a picture from the Door County Environmental Council where you and Ruth received the reward for work ranging from the 1980s fighting the coal power plant that was going to come to Sturgeon Bay.
Yeah.
And up even through a few years ago when you went head-to-head with the U.S. Coast Guard about firing live ammunition into Lake Michigan.
Oh, yes, they had a big Coast Guard meeting at Stone Harbor, and I was one of the person who presented a couple of words. I told them that I had a military operations spec as a light machine gunner, and they had located 8 sites in Lake Michigan that they were going to have light machine gun practice. I said that rather than sit on a boat and fire a light machine gun, they could sit in a rocking chair and have the same effect. And that was in the Milwaukee Journal, and I don't know if that influenced them, but anyway, finally they did not have light machine gun practice on Lake Michigan.
It must have been impressive because you were the only one to testify against it.
Yeah, could well be.
Yes.
Could well be.
You've also served on and been part of many boards, from the Ridges, the Land Trust, and Lakeshore Conservation and things like that. Does any group or any of those things stand out that you...
Yes, one that was the most impressive as far as my thinking was the Fox River. I remember as a child, when we crossed the Fox River in Green Bay, I looked at that dirty water and said, someday I'll do something about that. Well, I did. We had the Clean Water Action Council, and after 20 years of suit, against the paper. There were 9 paper companies that were involved. We finally won, and I was one of the members of that suit, believe that legal suit. What's it called? Anyway, it was ruled that paper companies had to put up the money to, and that is almost all the cleanup is almost completed today. I think they have just a little more to go. And one part of that was the NR National Resource Damage Assessment was a part of the suit, and that I think our county benefited from that. Any organization that was affected by the dirty water in Green Bay or couldn't apply and get funds through the NRD, the Natural Resource Damage Assessment.
A couple people that I'd like you both to comment on is you both had a very good relationship with Emma Toft.
Yes, Emma was a special friend.
And now you have a granddaughter, Emma, don't you?
Oh, yes, we
Yes,
do.
yes. How'd you first get to know Emma?
I was introduced to Emma by the Harold Shine, who was the wildlife manager for Door and Marinette counties. He introduced me to Emma. And that was way back in about 1960 or so.
And I met her before that. The landscape specialist for the university had been a student of Jens Jensen's. And while we were driving around Door County, we went to visit Emma because he had met her then, probably in 1949.
Oh,
And she was a great friend.
and very focused on her beliefs in the environment.
Yes, she was a great influence, really, and she was a prolific letter writer, and we've got stacks of her letters. She wrote to Carla mostly. She and Carla became good friends when Carla was 2 years old, I think.
And that's another time you and Mr. Lucy met, was when you went with Emma to receive some award.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
that was funny.
yeah,
We were sitting in the outer office of Lucy's office, and there was quite a large group of us there to see him get the award. Emma was sitting next to me, and as Lucy came in, he immediately came over with his hand outstretched and said, "I have long wanted to meet you, Miss Toft." And she looked up at him and she shook her finger and she said, "Don't you let them straighten the road to Newport." And he looked so surprised that you just had to laugh.
Yes.
And a few minutes later, she leaned over to me and she put her hand up and she said, "Do you think I was too harsh on the governor?" But that was Emma.
we had many excursions. One was to the largest white pine in the world at Newald, Wisconsin. So it was Ruth and Roy and myself, of course, went to Newald and see the white pine, and that was the only time she allowed her picture to be taken. It was in front of that white pine. That photograph has been
And she wanted to
used
take
quite
yes.
a lot.
Yes.
Then we went to a cabin of friends of mine near Newell. She had never seen a Gray J whiskey jack or a brown cap chickadee, boreal chickadee.
Boiled chicken.
And in a tree alongside that cabin. It was like someone had planted them. There was a gray jay and a boreal chickadee. So she was, Roy had never seen one either, which was, so they both saw their first boreal chickadee and a gray jay.
And you just mentioned Roy. He's been a big part of your life, too.
He certainly has. Yeah. Yes, he had a great, great influence on my mentor,
Yes.
and he had a great influence on me. And we did many, many things together.
Yes.
Did a lot of work at the ridges.
You and Roy saw the first western bluebird that I ever heard about in Door County on a Christmas bird count.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry to correct you, but that was a mountain bluebird.
A mountain bluebird.
Sorry. There's a difference. There are a lot. The
That-
westerns are quite common in the mountains, are not. Yeah, that was really unusual.
That was the time that you and Roy were taking peppermint schnapps in your hot cocoa, though, too. So
Yeah,
I was
that's right.
never quite sure about that.
But that was really a unusual sighting. I don't know if they had a mountain bluebird sighting in Wisconsin before. I don't think so.
The Ridges, you were president there for many, many years.
Yeah.
In fact, you were president before you were a member.
Yeah,
I remember I was working there at the time,
Yeah.
and they found that glitch. So
yeah. Yes, I was president for 15 years and a member for 35.
you've done many trips. You and Ruth have gone many places, to Sevastopol, to many trips to northern Wisconsin, to up in Canada, Churchill or whatever. What's some of your favorite trip memories, Carl?
Yeah, I had many favorites. Ruth, what do you think was our most favorite?
It was always the last one for me.
Yeah.
Whatever it was a great trip. Carl especially enjoyed the last one that we've taken, and that was to Norway.
To Norway, yes.
Took the mailboat up the, I was going to say river, up the
Fjords.
and through the fjords and up to the top and back, and it was very relaxing, and we stopped at many small towns and walked around and enjoyed them. It was a good trip. Iceland was fun. New Zealand was great. Churchill was probably the most memorable.
Yeah.
For the rustic part. Yes.
Yeah.
And certainly being in the Ukraine and being at Yalta, where they signed the World War II.
Yes, we always wanted to go to
They
Sevastopol.
told about Churchill and Stalin and Roosevelt being there, and Churchill leaned over to Roosevelt and said, "Yeah, Stalin wanted peace. He wanted a piece of Germany and a piece of Poland and some other areas."
Yes.
One of the best parts about our trips were the friends we traveled with.
Oh.
The Maddens, the Hammerbergs, and then later on, Kel Bonnevere and Herb Klein. And we've been very fortunate to have wonderful. I wonder if I can break here because I'm going to get things ready.
You want to leave us?
Could I leave you?
You can leave, sure.
Thank you.
Carl, I'm going to ask you a few questions about your children, some stories a little bit, or
Yeah.
grandchildren.
Yes, well, I've always said I had the greatest wife and the greatest children in the world. So, yeah, we have 9 great-grandchildren. And,
Wow.
yeah, I think it's 9 or some more. Yes, they're great. They've been great help to us in so many ways. John and I, for about 20 years, we went to northern Ontario, Sioux Lookout, fishing, and those really were great excursions. So, and a lot of fun. All of a sudden, something unusual happened to us. The last time I was with them, I hooked a big walleye and a muskie, or was a big northern pike, grabbed it, and Dustin, their grandson, scooped it up. The net threw it up in the air and it hit me in the head. So that was
So
and every time we had something
Yes.
unusual happen.
Carl, I was talking to your neighbor, Kari Wold,
Yeah.
and he told me that when you moved here, your children came and moved you. He said when he moves, he has to go help his children.
Oh, yes.
But your children have really been,
That's right, they do it. They've really been done all kinds of things for us. That's great. I hardly had to work at all.
no,
Between my wife and children, I could sit and rock.
besides your family, Carl, what's one thing you're most proud of?
All my friends, like you, Mike, and Barb, and many others. Oh, I certainly, the friends that I've had, all, it's been absolutely the greatest friends in the world. Well, that's elderly up home. The people that I got to know in service, and absolutely great people. And
Well-
I've been so fortunate to have great friends.
Well, Carl, we're very lucky to have you. I don't know how many people I talk to still can't call you Carl. They want to call you Mr. Scholz.
Yeah.
Because it's totally out of respect, and
No,
you're the greatest example of integrity many of us have ever known. So,
thank you.
do you have any other comments you'd like to include, or?
You want to take a break now, or are we ready for a break?
I think we're ready for being done almost.
Oh,
Thank you, laddie.
unless there's something else.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything
Well, I
else we
think
can,
we
we can
covered
talk
it.
about after we.
Why don't you do a, Mike, why don't you do a sum up? We've been talking to Carl. and
Okay.
you know,
Just a second. We've been talking to Carl Scholz and his wife Ruth, and we've been talking about memories from the last 90 years, Carl. There's still many more memories to come, but as we've talked about, there's definite connections, Carl, connections with the environment, connections with people, and thank you very much for allowing us to review those connections, and I appreciate the influence you've had on me and many other people do too, Carl, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Mike, for all the great things you have done with me and for me, and for moderating this. You do a super job of being a moderator.
You're welcome, Carl, and I've enjoyed it. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Marsha, Carl and Ruth's daughter, for this next question I'm going to ask Carl, and then I'd like you to add to it, please. Carl, I wonder what it was like having your father as the superintendent of Sevastopol schools when your children went there.
Oh, that was a pleasure.
It
For
was.
them.
For them.
Yeah.
Carl,
Yeah.
in
Oh,
Your
I had to
children-
be very careful that I didn't
Yes.
give them special privileges, which they deserved.
You taught them how to fish, how to ski.
I have fish and ski, hunt.
You took them ice fishing without a shanty, I heard.
Yeah.
That's the real way to do ice fishing.
I remember Jane took that hunting safety course, and she went deer hunting, and a buck stood about 25 feet from her, and she couldn't shoot. She never said a word about ever going hunting again. You remember that?
Yeah, well, I know I was the only one that did not go hunting.
John would sit in a blind with Ruth, and the first time he was in there about 5 minutes. He said, "Where are all the deer?"
You forgot to teach them the patience part. Marsha, you told me a story what it was like to go to school with Carl on Saturday mornings
Yes.
as a child.
Yes. Yes, I think my mother, after having us all week long, wanted my father to take us to school with him when he'd go to work on Saturdays. So we would go and he'd let us play in the gym. Well, he was working in his office, but then we would go up to his office and ask for money. So it was a little grocery store next to the school that had lots of penny candy. So usually we could get some money out of him to go over to the store and get candy.
So you had this huge playground on Saturday mornings
Yes.
inside the school.
Yes, we had some good times. Sometimes even let the ropes down. I remember we would climb up the rope.
I imagine it would have been a good place to play hide and seek.
Yes.
Do they have ropes in gyms yet for climbing?
I believe they do, and the rings hanging for gymnastics things.
They know.
You remember anything else from your childhood that we should remind Carl of?
Well, when you were talking about fishing, I remember going fishing, and when it was ice fishing, he'd say we could go ice skating while he fished, but he didn't tell us that we had to shovel off the lake first before we could go ice skating. And yes, it was just out in the elements. There were no little fish houses or anything to keep us warm when we were out there.
Carl also was famous for bringing live animals into school, and I'm sure you got involved in some of that.
Oh, yes, yes. When we were on family trips, it wasn't uncommon to stop alongside the road and pick up something and put it in the car with the rest of the family. Or Mom would send us down to get something out of the freezer, and there'd be animals in the freezer.
Yes, Carl created quite a taxidermy collection, didn't he?
Yes.
One other thing that Carl was involved in was for years bringing the ducks to school. I remember teaching a story about ducks, and you usually brought 3 or 4 ducks. And
Yeah, or more.
yes, and you remember how much fun the children had?
Yeah. Well, they really got excited over that. And they all wanted to pick one up.
There was one duck you wouldn't let them pick up, though, the Muscovy one.
Muscovy had that bit.
It was quite an experience. Most of them had never held a duck before,
Yeah.
I'm sure. And you were taped doing this. I think there's a YouTube of Carl Scholz and the ducks somewhere.
Oh, it could be.
Have any of you ever eaten duck? No. Wild duck? You've eaten wild, how about duck in a restaurant? Have you ever eaten duck in a restaurant? You know what kind of duck you ate? 99% of the time is this duck. It's a Chinese duck. You know what the name of it is? This white duck? This is
Listen to what Mr. Scholz is saying.
this is a Pekin duck. Now the Pekin ducks are raised by the millions primarily for food. Mr. Tank has 2 of these, and one is named Phyllis. And I was gonna bring Phyllis, because that's a lady's name, isn't it? But instead I got Philip. Is that all right? But you know why we would call a goose like this Phyllis? I'll bet that your teachers would know. Mrs. Marshall, do you know why?
I'm sure it has something to do with Phyllis Diller.
Phyllis, see, look, that's where she got the idea for her hairdo.
Her hair was always bushy.
That's a mosquito. No, a male. That's a male.
Another project you did with your children and at school was making maple syrup.
Oh, yeah.
Did you make maple syrup as a child?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, we always, in the woods we made it. I remember one year I wandered off, it got lost in a swamp. And it wasn't so serious, but because it was snow, but they found me
When you were a child?
when I was a child. Yeah, we used a scalding kettle, sort of multi-purpose kettle. But then later years, of course, we brought the children to the farm to make maple syrup, and we didn't use that scalding kettle.
There have been countless children that have told me they made maple syrup at home, and there's a few commercial people making maple syrup in Door County that had their start by watching you do it at Sevastopol School.
Yeah.
How many of you have ever had an interdisciplinary experience in a field trip? This is an interdisciplinary experience. What does that mean? Do you know?
What does inter?
What does it mean? Yes.
That where you gonna do something? during field
Do something or many things? Many things. You're going to have some chemistry, some geology, and some reading, some language arts. Now, I have a piece of ironwood which has more energy in it than any other wood in this area, and this is a piece of cedar. Now the cedar has only half the energy that this ironwood, and we'll pass it around and you tell me why. Everybody has to, there, and then just pass it on. Just pass it around. Why does that piece of ironwood have more energy in it than that cedar?
It's heavier?
Heavier, that's right. What's that bird that's greeting you? Did you hear it?
Yeah.
Did you hear it? What is that?
A sandhill crane?
Sandhill crane, good. You get an extra pint of maple syrup.
That's Ashley.
Take down her name.
I thought it was solar.
In fact, what is the source of all energy?
Solar?
Yeah, it's solar, the sun. And how does that tree produce sugar that is in the sap. How does the tree do that? How does it do that? Let's see. Yeah.
Is it sort of like a photosynthesis?
That's exactly it. Wow, yeah, it's a big word, isn't it? Photosynthesis. That's an important process, photosynthesis. And there are hundreds of little, almost thousands of little factories. Each leaf is like a little factory that's producing sugar. It takes 86 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup if the sugar content of the sap is 1%.
Honey is the only food produced by insects that's eaten by man. The only thing that insects produce that man eats.
Another thing about Sevastopol I want to mention is one of the best parties I've ever went to at Sevastopol, Carl, was the time in 2014 when we had the party for you to go to the honor flight.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a wonderful party.
Yes, it was. Yes.
And Carl and Ruth and Marsha came to school, and it was under false pretenses. You didn't know that this party was going to happen.
That's right.
But it was 556 students came to the gymnasium to wish you a wonderful honor flight.
Yeah.
And one thing I remember about it, Carl, is you stood there after the program and shook hands with every student, I think.
Yeah.
That was very impressive.
Yeah.
How was your flight to Washington, D.C.?
Oh, that was great.
I think you and John went, didn't you?
Yeah. And I think it was in a paper, I had a little girl in a sailor outfit came up to me and I shook her hand. She was as cute as could be. Yeah, I remember when we got back to Milwaukee Mitchell Field, they said we were going to have a parade. You know who the parade was? We were the parade.
Yes, you were.
I thought there was going to be a parade.
Yes, you were led by a band, and it was really
Yes,
a celebration.
and
There were must have
a
been
number of
thousands of people there.
Yes.
Yes.
They were just lined up.
The terminal at Mitchell Field was full.
Oh.
You
yeah.
couldn't find room to
I'll
sit or
be there.
stand.
No.
Yeah.
It was for the
I
honor.
was surprised everybody that many people.
When your brother-in-law went at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
They went together on
Down
the honor
camp,
flight.
yeah.
Yes, and so my brother and then my cousin also went.
Carl, you wanted to mention a little bit about an endeavor that you were involved in was about the mines that have almost come to Wisconsin. The Crandon mine,
Yeah.
the taconite mine, and your involvement with the
Yeah,
WRAA.
Yeah, that was Governor Nelson appointed me to the Wisconsin Resource Commission. And the first thing we did was blow the whistle on reserve mining at Silver Bay, Minnesota. They were dumping their effluent into Lake Superior, and it was a big plume out into the lake. It was quite obviously material that shouldn't be in the lake. Then I went to court, but Superior and Duluth both
Pollutants? Or?
No, effluent, what is it? Asbestos.
Oh,
They detected asbestos in their water, and then that ended it. The judge ordered they had to cease and desist, so that shut down that mine. But we blew the whistle on reserve mining, and we met in Madison, and then we one day and the next morning there were, I think, reserve mining had about 6 attorneys there. They really intimidated us. Yeah.
this is a picture of you looking out at the water somewhere, Carl.
Yeah, that's in the Wolf. This is the Wolf River behind Wild Wolf and Herb Bittner's place.
And that's about the time of the involvement you had with fighting the Crandon mine. I think.
Yeah, yeah. And Herb Bittner was a major battler in that.
As were you.
Yeah. But I see that and they formed an organization after this, and that is now involved in fighting the present mine that they want to put in on the river, Menominee River, but in Michigan. And that's even as bad as the Crandon mine.
And one more thing to talk about, Carl, is walking sticks.
Oh, yeah.
You've been involved with making walking sticks for
Yeah.
many years.
Yes. And they have a manual. Yeah. I think I taught walking sticks to about 300 people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the
One of the first classes, I think we had 30, but and I learned them.
Yes.
Yeah.
and made out of cedar or mullein or
Mullein
a whole
and,
variety of things. And I think this picture's from you, isn't it?
Yes.
And this is Carl with his walking stick.
Yeah.
The walking stick that was once Emma Toff's, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah.
So it's a very useful thing, isn't it?
And no one should walk without a stick. And I have a manual that I wrote. I have to have that copied. I kept one copy, fortunately.
Yes.
It used to be easy for me to get things copied when we had a printing shop. Like,
Yes. Well, you and Wally Hammerberg made many walking sticks
Oh,
today.
yeah.
So that's wonderful.
Yeah, and we did it for the ridges. For,
Crossroads
yeah,
and clearing too, didn't
the
you?
clearing and the park. And and for the Lawrence College too. They had a medical group that came there, and they had always wanted walking sticks. Oh, and for John Bosco,
St. John Bosco.
they came.
One of your latest endeavors, Carl, was at the canal in Sturgeon Bay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Tell us that story.
Yeah, that's a good story. I got to know the manager of this district, Tony Callisto, and I thought it'd be a good idea to have you can't see the plaque that's standing in front of it, to have a plaque on a rock. So I talked to him, and they said they're going to bring 100 big blocks of granite from Warsaw. And he said, you pick out the one you want.
That was the fellow from the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, he has an office in Kewanee.
So that rock by the canal was one you had in place there?
Yeah. Well, the first, I put some 2x4s down, and the boom that they had on their barge wasn't long enough. So they had a big barge come down from Duluth. They entertained me for half a day, and then they, at their boom, they could put it on those 2x4s. Can you imagine? That's a beautiful rock.
Yes, it is.
The plank is behind there now. The cedars. Have you looked at the cedars, Beatles?
No, I haven't.
Unbelievable.
I remember planting them there with you, but
Oh, they're beautiful.
they're huge now.
Oh, they have. So it's really really a nice site.
So if
Yeah.
anybody'd like to see that rock, it's right along the canal,
Yeah.
near the Coast Guard
Yeah.
station.
Well, they have 3 little parking lots, and one of them has a Corps of Engineers sign, and that's where they have their rock.
Thank you.
And that's a mile-long park, a hike. It's a park from up north where at the beginning of the canal and Sturgeon Bay to the Coast Guard station is 1 mile. So it's a mile-long park. Very nice. Yeah.
Thank you, Carl.
And that other plaque is for that's the official Wisconsin rock, red granite.
Red granite.
Special red granite.
Or state
And I
rock.
describe it there in that little black and white plaque.
You're always ready to teach somebody something, aren't
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
You're a wonderful teacher, Carl.
Thank you.
I think that's it, laddie.
Well, then wrap it up.
Well, thank you, Marsha, for joining us, and thank you, Carl, for always being a fantastic teacher to all of us.
Thank you, Mike, for
Yeah.
doing a
Oh, you're very
superb
welcome.
job as a moderator.
Well,
Thank you for Marsha for being part of the show.
Well, I'm glad I could be.
and I'm happy that Ruth encouraged us all to get this video going,
Oh,
Carl.
okay. Good.
Thank you. And thank you, laddie.
Yeah, thank you, laddie. Yeah.